Alright, so let's discuss evolution by natural selection and what that means. So, again, a different scientist, Thomas Malthus, believed that more individuals are produced than can possibly survive, and Darwin as well, that aligned with his thinking. And Darwin knew that individuals must compete for a limited number of resources. There's only so much habitat and so much food and so much water that these organisms would compete with each other, and some would outcompete the others, leading to the death of some individuals. These individuals vary in their characteristics, their phenotypes, and some of this variation is heritable in their genotypes. And even though Darwin didn't know about genetics and DNA at this point, he did know that there were traits that were passed down to the next generation. Some of these traits might provide higher fitness to individuals, and again, that means a better fit to their environment and a better chance that they will survive and reproduce. And that really led to his thinking, this idea of that certain organisms would be the ones passing their traits down to the next generation. That was his thinking that resulted in this idea of evolution, and that the more that these traits are passed down to the next generation, the more likely that we'll see them in the next generation. And this could lead to the evolution or changing of these organisms. Just take a look at this group of ladybugs here, and you'll notice that there are a lot of variations in the shapes and types of their spots, and number of spots. If we look at the darkest of the ladybugs, it's completely black and doesn't have any spots, and this would be really well camouflaged in a dark environment, while the ladybug with little spots would not blend in at all. And if a predator was coming, we would expect that the lighter ladybug would get eaten first. So over periods of time, we might see that the darker ladybug was able to pass their traits on more, and eventually the population would be dark. Here's the thing to remember though. What if the environment changed? What if the environment no longer was a dark environment and instead a very light environment? Well, at that point, the ladybugs that had very few spots would be in an advantage because they would be able to camouflage better. So what I'm trying to get at is that the environment is going to be the one that dictates which individuals survive and what traits are passed on to the next generation. That's what natural selection is. It's nature selecting which individuals survive and pass their traits down. And that's what survival of the fittest is. It's survival of the organisms that are most fit to the environment they live in. We're going to introduce this new term, an adaptation. And an adaptation is a trait that increases the fitness of an individual or the likelihood that it will survive. Adaptations can be physical or behavioral. And one thing I want to make clear to you guys is that adaptations, one individual cannot adapt. If I'm a giraffe and I'm trying to reach the leaves on a high tree, I can't make my neck grow larger. By chance, I might be born with a mutation that allows me to have an unusually large neck. That would be an adaptation. Is that mutation, if it provides me with an advantage over the other individuals that I'm competing for resources with, it might allow me to reproduce more and survive and pass those traits down. So populations can adapt, individuals cannot adapt. And fitness is the contribution an individual makes to the next generation relative to the contribution of others. So individuals that are more fit are going to have more offspring. And evolution by natural selection occurs when a population of organisms changes or adapts over time as a result of individuals with these heritable traits leaving more offspring than the other individuals. So again, guys, populations can adapt, individuals cannot adapt. Adaptations, though, have led to really, really complex looking organisms, one that fit perfectly in with its environment. If we take a look here, you might barely see, but there is a praying mantis here hiding amongst these flowers. And it has evolved to look so similar to this flower and it didn't happen overnight. It's not like one praying mantis was born that was pink and looked exactly like it. What happened was that one praying mantis had a mutation that allowed it to look a little pinkish. and look a little similar to the flowers in the area. And what happened was that praying mantis reproduced because it was more likely to survive and had offspring that looked similar to it. Now, over time, only the ones that blended the most in with their environment would be the ones that survived. And that's because all organisms don't survive. So when we're looking at this praying mantis, over time, only the ones that looked fit in the most with their environment would survive. And because of that, eventually, over thousands, maybe millions of years, these organisms that live now are only the ones that look so similar and blended so much with their environment. The things I wanted to point out to you guys was that evolution isn't perfect. And we have features, for example, of certain traits that our ancestors used that we don't currently use today. We'll talk more about those later, but an example is our wisdom teeth. We're born with wisdom teeth, but we don't need them. In fact, they create issues for us, and we have them surgically removed. Another example is our eyes. Our eyes have evolved to be extremely complex and have allowed us to have great vision. However, we actually have a blind spot right in the middle of our eye, and you can see here it's labeled in this diagram as the fovea. And again, we've evolved to have very complex eyes, but again, it's not perfect. And that's because evolution occurs with a descent with modification. And basically what that means is that we're not reconstructing an organism when an organism evolves. This evolution are small tinkerings that are occurring with the blueprints of the original organism. So over long periods of time, natural selection produces organisms that look and act different and live in different habitats, but if we look at them on an anatomical level, they're still similar to our ancestors. For example, you guys might not realize, but whales, current-day whales, actually evolved from a wolf-like creature that lived in the deserts of Africa. And if we look at the current-day whale's flippers, you'll notice that it has the same bone structure as its ancestral wolf. The same bones, just shaped a little bit differently, that allow them to live better in the environment that they live today. And again, these small changes that occurred, you can see here are just 4 examples, but there were thousands of other in-between species here that eventually led from that original wolf-like creature to the whale that we see today. Here's another example of descent with modification with elephants. We look at the African and Asian elephant that are alive today. You can see those at the end of this family tree. And you'll see here that the original organisms, that ancestors of the elephants, didn't even have tusks. And you'll see that eventually we have these different branches of our family tree that have eventually led to these different shaped tusks, depending on when the organism lived and what environment it lived in. And that's what Darwin's theory of evolution proposed. He believed that all species are related if we track back far enough by one single common ancestor. So we not only share a common ancestor with other animals such as dogs and wolves and reptiles and insects, but we also share a common ancestor with plants and fungi and even bacteria if we trace back far enough. He knew that some of these organisms became extinct. They no longer reproduced and they died out. In fact, we'll learn later that 99.9% of all species that have ever walked the earth are now extinct. And these species are constantly evolving over long periods of time. So that's evolution, and hopefully you guys understand that this process, again, small changes over extremely long periods of time. Later this week and next week, we'll be talking about what evidence we have that supports why evolution is in fact real. All right, thanks guys.